I would say the source of passion for my business is knowing that I'm doing a vital job for the public safety entity. They are serving people, and it's a life and death situation. They're out there putting their life on the line for us, and the radio is their lifeline. They call and get help so that they don't need to use a gun. And it's made all the difference in the world in how a situation's handled. Assisting the first responders isn't just sitting back behind a desk and saying, gosh, I hope this radio system works for them. You actually find yourself riding with a first responder. You ride in the car with him and you go and see what problems he's having. We always hope that they have the best communication system available to them because they do depend on these things for saving their life and saving the life of the people they respond to.
The radio is our oxygen, that's our lifeblood. And if we don't have that radio to get back up to come to us, we're on our own. So it's very important it works right, because when we need help as soon as we can get it there.
As an industry leader, Bob has probably invented more stuff and given away the patents than anybody in that industry. He works closely with Harris Corporation now. They recognized him as being one of their leading installers. Bob doesn't make radios, he installs radio networks, and he builds teams to do that. He's just a great guy.
It's the old adage, when you press the button on the radio, you want it to be heard. We're the ones that are responsible to make sure it happens. That is our charter. That is how important it is. And we take that very, very seriously.
My parents were farmers up in central Illinois. They had 5 children in 5 years. My father influenced me the most as far as working on the farm. We all had to participate. We all had to do our share.
They were older, and I think it was very important to them to set good examples. They knew what it was like to work hard, get out there, and make your spot in the world.
When we were young, growing up on the farm, we had to make our own fun. There was nobody else around, so you learned to interact with your brothers and sisters. It makes us very close today. Bob, growing up, you felt him working behind you, and he was usually a step ahead.
I would say the first entrepreneurial activity was when my father gave us the proceeds from 3 acres of the farm. And if we took care of all the acreage, he would give us the profit from the 3-acre patch. And we learned to invest in ourselves and our cooperation. I went to an all-Catholic school. One physics teacher, Father Pisers, guided me in the direction of I should go into electronics. That was the future. I saw my wife, we were both in Louisville, Kentucky, and she was walking across the balcony in a lab coat. And I looked up and I did say, I'm gonna marry that woman. And she just came up from Puerto Rico. She hardly spoke English. We did have her girlfriend go out on our first date and interpret everything that was going back and forth.
I think what attracted me at first was his maturity. He was kind, and I liked the way he talked about his family. And I was very close to my family, so that spoke to me about him.
And so she was there for 6 months and then had to go back to Puerto Rico to serve 2 years with the medical community to pay for the grant. And I said, if I'm gonna marry that woman, I have to go to Puerto Rico. So I went to Puerto Rico on my own and got a job. It was a new resort that was being started in Puerto Rico, and it was at the ground level. And I became the radio, microwave, and telephone planner and repair. 6 or so months after I was down there, I proposed to Carmen. Her father spoke no English. I spoke very little Spanish, but I was trying to speak to him to ask for her hand in marriage. We got a little bit heated in the discussion, him not understanding me completely, me not understanding him completely, so my wife stepped in.
And they were having this conversation. Finally, my dad calls me and he said, what is he trying to tell me? And I looked at him and said, what are you telling him? And he started to tell me, and I said, well, my dad was very concerned about me marrying and moving away from the family and the island. And I said, well, he's not gonna like that. So I will tell my dad what I felt was appropriate to hear. And then my dad will explain to me what he wanted Bob to hear. So finally, I ended asking for my own hand in marriage. And it's been 46 years ever since.
I found out probably several years ago that if she hadn't translated the way she did, we probably wouldn't have gotten married. I was working for a gentleman in Palmas del Mar, and he decided that, hey, Florida might be a great place to go to start a business. And so my wife and I made the trip up. We loved it, and we decided when we went back that we decided together that this would be a good thing and she would leave the island. That wasn't in line with what I'd promised her father. And so I had to be very careful, and since then we've made every effort to get back there 2 to 3 times a year. Our first location was a gas station in downtown Vero Beach. Howard Culver and I set up business here. For the first 5 years of our company, I made no salary. If it hadn't been for my wife Carmen going to work at Vero Beach Labs, we would have gone out of business. And so that's what we did for 5 years, and finally it began to produce.
Bob loves to be involved in the widget part of it, the technical part. Howard handled more of the sales. Bob was the techie guy on the bench. They were a great complement to each other. He never worried about getting his hands dirty. He never worried about, oh, I'm the owner or the president of the company. And he's always willing to help and show and tell. And I think that's been probably one of the best things that has grown this company. Bob climbed some towers, yes. We worked as long as it took to get the job done. It was not a year and a half before we had to move.
My decision to join the Indian River County Volunteer Ambulance Squad was kind of based on doing work with public safety. It was that I wanted to give back to this community. And what better way to do it than an organization that used our equipment. I went in as a first aider. I loved what I was doing there, and I became an EMT. And that was one of the greatest accomplishments I think I've had.
I first met Bob in 1977, as I recall. Bob was a small business owner, and so at the time there was a volunteer ambulance squad. And they transported people to the hospital because there wasn't a full-time professional service locally to do it. At that time, I was a young firefighter here in town, and most often the ambulances would have 2 volunteers on it. And Bob's shifts pretty much coincided with my work shifts. I remember working a gunshot wound a couple times with Bob, and Bob and I would ride in the back of the ambulance because they would take somebody off the fire truck on those more serious patients. So Bob was the kind of person that really became engaged in the community as much as he was a small business owner at the time in the community.
Howard was older, and he didn't want to remain in command of being on call. So at that time, in 1982, I purchased Howard's shares. I was scared to death about taking over the company, but I called my brother. He says, "You can do it."
So Bob was at the helm. And you have to understand, back in that day, radio was a bit of a novelty. There was no cell phone. So this was the first type of radio communications that people could put in their trucks, like electricians and plumbers. We grew fast, and we outgrew our facility, and we started to get into public safety.
Public safety radio systems are the police, the fire, the ambulance, the first responders, and being able to provide them a reliable network, something that's available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We gained the trust of the public safety community by doing what we said at all costs. A handshake in our business is a contract. When you tell a sheriff you're going to do something, you'd better do it or you're ruined, not just in this community, but word gets out.
Think of it this way. It's like if you had somebody on the ground and then you had somebody at a mountaintop. If you look at the old movies, for instance, they have signal fires, but you couldn't see each other. So you'd set a fire here, and the person on the mountaintop would sit there and say, oh, I see the fire, and they'd light a fire, and these people would know, hey, there's something going on over there. Radio's the same way. Instead of trying to directly talk from one place to another, we talk to the top of the mountain. So that's really how relay through a tower works. So we hired more people, and it was scary and exciting. We were awarded a big contract in Brevard, biggest thing we'd ever done.
Well, you know, I think when you look at Communications International, from the moment you start talking to them until that critical incident happens, they're always there for you. And I think that's really a testament of how Mr. Stork's always been. Our Communications Center is the lifeline for our citizens. They're the first one that our citizens are talking to when they're calling for help. Their job is to not only protect our citizens, but to also protect our deputies that are out there responding to these calls. With Communications International, their equipment's going to be there, it's going to work, and they're going to stand by it.
Communications is one of the foundational pillars of first responders. And recognizing how important communications is, Bob actually places people at communications tower sites. He puts emergency work teams together. He puts a person in the emergency operations center to make sure there's no losses. And if there is something that would happen that would take out part of the communications system, Bob has already prepared a workaround plan to make sure that the field users don't even know that it's happened.
Working with family is not as difficult as you would think. You remove yourselves from their supervision and make sure someone is between you and them. We had quite a few family members. I think it was at one point 5 family members working with us. In 2009, 2010, I was beginning to understand that this thing needed to progress beyond me. I had to plan for a transition. We were 200 families strong at this point.
Met with Bob, and Bob was thinking about selling his company. We were able to discover that for his particular company, with the right financials that he had, he could sell it to what we call an ESOP, which is an employee stock option plan. Basically, that's where Bob would sell the company to the employees and then get paid over a period of time.
There's a saying that as an ESOP, we send an owner out to each and every call. And that is paid back in spades. Every year, when we present their stock certificates, it's a formal presentation. The employees are loving it.
The key factors that led Bob to the decision of moving CI to an ESOP was probably first and foremost his love for CI. Bob, I know, worked hard to find a way to take the thing that he loved so much and make sure it could successfully transition his eventual exit. What's different about the security of the networks that we design and install today from what we've done in the past is in the past we were a radio company. So we become much more of an IT-based company. One thing that's always been important to Bob and that he's made sure that he instilled within the company is wherever we are, we're a part of that community. CI's average customer has been with us for over 30 years. And what our track record will always show is that we will perform. And we will be right there with you in the toughest of times, because that's when these systems are the most critical.
I think Bob deserves the Entrepreneur of the Year award because Bob's entire career has been giving back to this community and to the neighboring communities. In the industry, Bob has always been a leader. He started from very humble beginnings and grew quite a large business. Bob also went to things as simple as some of the firefighters had suggested the knobs on the radio, they feel alike. Made them so that a person wearing thick, heavy fire gloves can use the radio. Also, on the interoperability side, make it so that somebody from fire rescue could talk to somebody in law enforcement without having to go through a dispatcher.
My dad's passed on his entrepreneurial spirit to my brother and I by just showing us there's no limits to anything you want to do. He's a perfect example of starting with nothing, absolutely nothing. We lived in a little 2-bedroom house when I was growing up, and then just sticking with it. The best part of being Bob Stork's daughter is that he always will have your back. He will always encourage you. You know you're always loved.
When it comes to our dreams, if we ever needed help, he always was there to support. He's always been generous and kind. Even when he didn't have a lot of money, he was very giving, especially to the church and to anyone that looks like they're in need.
Bob and I, we enjoy the family, and we love having the kids over. The values that Bob had shared with the children, I guess, first of all, is our faith. Another thing is family values. They know that family is first.
I would say the important things about being an entrepreneur is to understand that if you give back to a community, it comes back to you tenfold. It's such a rewarding experience.
We are so blessed to be in this wonderful community, and we have so many wonderful nonprofits here. From the very beginning, we got involved.
Bob and his wife Carmen are marvelous examples of people who live in this community who want to give back to this community. They both are always available, and they're always so cheery. It's just a joy to have them there, but they are marvelous contributors.
The mission of the 100 Club is to take care of any problems that you might have that arise in first responders, from something as bad as one of them getting killed or getting hurt. The 100 Club steps in and takes care of the family. He's not real showy about it, but he's always there to give. And they've helped out a lot of first responders in this community.
I met Bob Stork when he was part of the inaugural Board of Trustees for Florida Polytechnic University. The university really was created to help grow a high-tech, high-skill, high-wage industry here in the state of Florida. We've been very lucky to have Bob serve on our board. He's a pleasure to work with, always a wonderful person and very given of his time.
They had literally just broken ground on the building when the governor appointed me to be on the board, and I see it growing to this day, and it's something I'm very proud to be part of.
Bob and Carmen also have been major supporters of United Against Poverty, which is an organization which was started by one of the members of the church. Our friendship really strengthened due to the fact that we love boating. When you go to the Bahamas with a boat, it's kind of a big ordeal. And when you spend 2 or 3 weeks together with anybody, you get to know a lot of things. So Bob is one of the most compassionate individuals I've ever met in my life.
The Bahamas are a special group of islands to me. The people are so welcoming. So we chose a small island and we built a home there. Of course, this year was where the Hurricane Dorian set. It was almost on top of the house for 48 hours. The house was leveled. We knew most of the people on the island, and we were concerned about their health. Everyone survived, and that's because of the loving community that there is there. They stand beside each other and help each other. We actually have some people staying with us from Green Turtle. Immediately after the Bahamas, we knew they needed water, they needed the basic things of life, and so my wife and I went down and started unloading crates so that they can get it over there quickly to them. I think the Bahamas has been well served by the Treasure Coast community. What they've done to help them survive the immediate days after has been life-saving. I've been retiring for 10 years. The people that have taken over are doing a great job, and it's time to step away. And so I go in 2 or 3 days a week when I want to and do some of these designs I've told you about, and love doing that. I'm glad they still want me around. As far as the future, I want to help out where I can. I do like to travel back and see my wife's family in Puerto Rico, and I want to be able to maybe start that inkling of that house back in the Bahamas one more time.
I don't think he will ever completely retire. It's just the way he is. He just loves what he does.
He's retired 4 times and he's still going in. So nobody believes him anymore. He doesn't think it's work. He's just having fun.
I have plans to completely retire because they don't need an old guy there forever. But as long as they have a corner for me and I can do something that is helpful, I will always be around there. That is my family. I'm living the American dream in that I started out with $1,400 and now I have a huge family. I am so blessed. God has blessed me, the community has blessed me, And the state of Florida has blessed me. We're part of their community now.